The $10 million sat there like a judgment from God himself. Not cash, something far more dangerous. Encrypted bearer bonds and access documents, still warm from the billionaire's distracted hands, waiting in a sleek black carry-on that didn't belong to her. Naomi's hand trembled above the open zipper. Nobody was watching. The security cameras in the executive lounge had been down for maintenance since 9 p.m. Her supervisor was 3 terminals away, too overwhelmed by delayed flights to check on anyone. The other cleaners had already clocked out. It was just her, the silent lounge, and $10 million in traceable financial instruments that could either save her life or destroy it. She knew it was a mistake. She'd watched the billionaire's phone light up with urgent notifications, watched him throw the bag onto the seat, already mentally boarding his private charter, watched him disappear through the priority gate, his mind on deals worth hundreds of millions, not the bag he'd left behind. This wasn't abandoned property. This was an accident. And keeping it wouldn't just be theft, it would be a federal crime. But reporting it meant trusting a system she'd seen steal from people like her. The same lost and found office where missing items vanished into supervisors' cars. The same airport that fired a cleaner last month for a passenger's false accusation. Naomi had worked here for 3 years, long enough to know that invisible people don't get the benefit of the doubt. She had maybe 2 minutes before the next security sweep. 2 minutes to decide who she really was when nobody was looking. 2 minutes to choose between saving her family and saving herself. What she did next didn't just change her life. She made a decision that would expose a criminal operation, save a billionaire from catastrophic loss, and prove that character, not money, is the rarest currency in the world. But first, she had to protect $10 million from the very people paid to secure it. And she had exactly 1 shift before they started looking for someone to blame. If you want to uncover what happens next in this shocking choiceless situation and never miss another jaw-dropping twist, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell right now. Your support helps this channel bring you even more insane stories like this. Now let's jump deep into the story. Terminal C's executive lounge was the kind of space where hedge fund managers closed deals over single malt scotch, and tech CEOs never looked up from their laptops. Naomi Brooks had cleaned it for 3 years, long enough to know that the leather chairs cost more than her annual salary, and that most travelers looked through her like she was made of air. She pushed her cleaning cart past the floor-to-ceiling windows, her lower back screaming in protest. The non-slip shoes she'd bought at Goodwill were already falling apart, the soles separating from the uppers with each step. Her shift had started at 10 p.m. It was now 2:04 a.m. Her son Marcus was asleep at home with her elderly mother, who needed medication Naomi's insurance wouldn't cover. The pills cost $340 a month. Naomi made $28,000 a year. She'd been splitting the pills in half for the past 6 weeks, stretching the prescription, praying her mother wouldn't notice the pain creeping back into her joints. Outside the windows, rain streaked down the glass in diagonal sheets. A delayed flight to Tokyo sat dark and silent on the tarmac. The storm had grounded everything for the past 2 hours. The airport felt like a cathedral after hours, vast, echoing, emptied of its usual chaos. Brooks, C-Terminal executive, then you're done for the night, crackled the radio on her belt. Dale Hutchins, her supervisor, tired, distracted, already thinking about his own clock out. Dale was one of the decent ones, which meant he ignored the cleaners instead of harassing them. Copy that, Naomi said, adjusting her gloves. The executive lounge was usually empty by 2 a.m. after the last international departures. She preferred it that way. No one watching. No one judging the speed of her work or the gray in her hair or the fact that she was 39 and cleaning up after people half her age who earned in a day what she made in a year. She entered through the service door, her cart's wheels whispering across plush carpet that muffled everything, including her existence. The lounge was dim, lit only by the accent lighting beneath the bar and the soft glow of emergency exit signs. Rain drummed against the windows. Somewhere in the ventilation system, a fan hummed its monotonous rhythm. That's when she saw the aftermath of him. A man's coat draped over chair 14. Expensive. Charcoal cashmere with a subtle sheen that caught the low light. An empty glass sat on the marble side table, 2 fingers of amber liquid still pooling at the bottom. And beside the chair, partially tucked beneath it as if kicked there accidentally, was a sleek black carry-on bag. Designer. the kind with reinforced corners and a leather luggage tag embossed in gold. Naomi stopped mid-step. In 3 years of night shift cleaning, she'd learned to read the debris of wealth. This wasn't a planned departure. The glass was still half full, the ice barely melted. The coat was the kind of thing people didn't leave behind unless something urgent had pulled them away. She approached slowly, her professional instincts screaming caution. Lost items went to the airport's central lost and found on the main terminal's second floor. Protocol was clear. Don't touch. Don't investigate. Radio it in, log the location, move on. But Naomi had also learned what happened to lost items at this airport. Especially expensive ones. Especially ones found by cleaners who couldn't afford lawyers. 2 months ago, a cleaner named Patricia had found a Rolex in the first-class bathroom. She'd turned it in properly, filled out the forms, done everything by the book. The watch vanished from lost and found within 6 hours. When the passenger came looking for it 3 days later, security had reviewed the footage and questioned Patricia for 4 hours. Threatened her with theft charges. Made her empty her locker, her purse, even checked her car in the employee lot. They never found the watch. Patricia quit 2 weeks later. Naomi glanced around the lounge. Empty. Silent except for the rain and the ventilation. She looked up at the corner where the security camera usually tracked every movement with its unblinking red eye. Bright orange maintenance tape covered the lens. System upgrade, temporary outage, read the notice zip-tied to the camera mount. She'd seen the facility's crew working on the system earlier in her shift, replacing cables, muttering about outdated infrastructure. The camera was blind. Her radio crackled again. Brooks, you done? Almost. Final sweep. Make it quick. Storm's getting worse. I'm trying to get everyone out early. Parking lots flooding near the employee entrance. Copy. The line went dead. Naomi stood alone with the bag. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the Pacific. She should call it in. She should walk away. She should do 100 things that would keep her invisible, keep her safe, keep her exactly where she'd been for 3 years, scrubbing other people's messes and going home to her own. Instead, she knelt down beside the chair. The bag was heavier than it looked. She pulled it out carefully, noting the way the leather tag swung free. No name visible from this angle, just an engraved logo she didn't recognize. Expensive. Everything about it screamed money. She glanced at the dead camera again, then at the empty lounge, then at the service door 20 feet away. Her hands moved to the zipper. Don't. But she was already pulling it open. The contents made her breath catch. The bag was organized with the precision of someone who lived in airports and boardrooms. Legal documents in clear plastic sleeves. 3 USB drives in a leather case. A tablet in a protective sleeve. A leather portfolio embossed with gold lettering. Whitmore Capital Holdings. And inside the portfolio, bound with a heavy-duty clip, official and terrifying in their precision, financial instruments with numbers that made her hands shake. Bearer Bond, Series A. Face value, $10 million. There were more. She didn't count them. Couldn't count them. Her brain had stopped processing information somewhere around the first comma. Beneath the bonds were other documents. Transaction authentication codes. Access instructions. Routing numbers. Things she didn't understand but recognized as important. As dangerous. This wasn't someone's forgotten laptop. This was someone's entire empire, compressed into a bag and left behind in a moment of distraction. This was $10 million in her hands. In a lounge with no cameras. No witnesses. No proof she'd ever been here except her own digital time card, which only showed she'd clocked into Terminal C, not specifically where. She could take it. Just zip the bag closed, put it in her cleaning cart beneath the trash bags and dirty towels, walk it out through the service corridors. Clock out. Drive home. Open it tomorrow in the privacy of her cramped apartment and figure out what to do with financial instruments worth more than she'd earn in 300 years. She thought of Marcus, who needed new shoes because his toes were cramping in the ones he had. She thought of her mother, whose hands had started to curl with arthritis she couldn't afford to treat properly. She thought of the eviction notice she'd hidden in her locker, 30 days to come up with $1,800 in back rent or be out on the street. This could fix everything. This could buy medicine and shoes and rent and breathing room. This could buy a future, but it could also buy federal prison. Because these weren't bills she could spend at a grocery store. These were traceable instruments. Serial numbers. Registration. The kind of thing that triggered investigations and audits and questions from people with badges and guns. And even if she could somehow cash them, which she couldn't, there was something else stopping her. The image of a man's face, glimpsed briefly 40 minutes ago when she'd been cleaning the main terminal. A white man in an expensive suit, late 40s, moving with the kind of purposeful speed that spoke of urgency. Phone pressed to his ear, face tight with stress. She'd seen him enter the executive lounge priority security lane. Seen him check his watch 3 times in 30 seconds. Seen the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept touching his jacket pocket like he was forgetting something. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story, but she recognized the look of a man whose mind was already miles ahead of his body. The kind of distraction that made people leave bags behind. This wasn't abandoned wealth. This was a mistake. And Naomi Brooks had been poor her entire life, but she'd never been a thief. She looked at the bonds again, at the numbers that could change everything, at the choice sitting in her lap like a live grenade. Then she looked at the dead camera, at the empty lounge, at her reflection in the rain-streaked window, a tired black woman in a cleaning uniform, invisible to the world, holding $10 million nobody knew she'd found. She had maybe 90 seconds before the next security sweep. 90 seconds to decide who she really was when nobody was looking. Naomi zipped the bag closed, but she didn't put it back under the chair. She stood, lifting it carefully, walked it to her cleaning cart, opened the lower storage compartment where she kept extra trash bags and industrial-strength cleaners, placed the bag inside, beneath a layer of dirty microfiber cloths, covered it with a black trash bag. Then she continued cleaning. She wiped down the bar, emptied the trash, vacuumed the carpet, straightened the chairs, did everything she would normally do, her movements automatic, her mind racing. She wasn't keeping it. She wasn't stealing it. But she wasn't reporting it to Lost and Found either. Because she'd seen what happened to expensive items that went through official channels. And she'd seen what happened to cleaners who found them. The system didn't protect people like her. The system blamed people like her. If this bag went to Lost and Found, it would never reach its owner. It would vanish into some supervisor's offshore account or get lost in processing or trigger an investigation that somehow ended with Naomi in an interrogation room explaining why her fingerprints were on $10 million worth of bearer bonds. No, if she was going to be honest, she was going to do it right, which meant protecting the bag until she could verify who it belonged to and return it directly. No intermediaries, no corrupt officials, no one who could make this her problem instead of her good deed. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was possibly the stupidest thing she'd ever done. But it was also the right thing. She finished the lounge in 12 minutes. Radioed Dale that she was done. Pushed her cart through the service corridors, her heart hammering every time she passed a security guard or another late-night employee. But no one looked twice at a cleaner with a cart. She was invisible. She'd always been invisible. She clocked out at 2:34 a.m., walked to her car through the flooding employee lot, rain soaking through her uniform, unlocked the trunk of her 2008 Honda Civic, the car that burned oil and had a check engine light that had been on for 8 months. She transferred the bag from the cart to the trunk, covered it with the emergency blanket she kept for winter breakdowns, closed the trunk. Then she sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, shaking. What had she just done? She hadn't stolen $10 million. But she hadn't returned it either. She'd taken it, hidden it, removed it from the airport without authorization. If anyone found out, it wouldn't matter that her intentions were good. It wouldn't matter that she was trying to protect it. She was a cleaner who'd walked out with a billionaire's fortune in her trunk. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain drummed on the roof. Naomi closed her eyes and thought of Marcus, of her mother, of the life she was risking for a principle she couldn't even articulate. Then she thought of the man in the suit, the distracted billionaire who'd made a mistake, the person who was probably realizing right now, in a private jet somewhere over the Pacific, that he'd left behind something worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. She would find him. She would verify ownership. She would return it properly. She just had to figure out how to do that without destroying herself in the process. Naomi started the car and drove home through the storm, her entire future sitting in a black carry-on bag in her trunk, waiting for her to prove she was exactly who she hoped she was when no one was watching. What Naomi doesn't know yet is that the bag's owner has already realized what he's lost. And in 14 hours, Her name will be at the top of a very dangerous list. Stay with me, because the choice she just made is about to turn her invisible life into the most visible story in the city. Charles Whitmore realized what he'd forgotten somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, exactly 847 miles from U.S. airspace. He was sitting in the cream leather captain's chair of his Gulfstream G650, reviewing acquisition documents on his laptop, when his hand reached automatically for the black carry-on he always kept within arm's reach. It wasn't there. He looked up, looked around the cabin. His executive assistant Jennifer sat across from him, typing on her own laptop. His lead counsel David was asleep in the rear seat, snoring softly. The flight attendant was in the galley preparing coffee. No bag. Jennifer, Charles said, his voice calm but sharp. Where's my case? She looked up, confused. Your briefcase? It's in the overhead. Not the briefcase. The black carry-on. The one with, he stopped. Jennifer didn't know what was in that bag. Nobody did except his private banker and his lead attorney, and David was asleep. Jennifer's face went pale. I thought you had it. I saw you with it at the airport. Charles stood, moving through the cabin with controlled urgency. He checked the overhead bins, the bathroom, the luggage compartment at the rear. Nothing. The carry-on wasn't on the plane, which meant it was still at the airport, in the lounge, where he'd set it down to take a call from his lead investor in Singapore, where he'd been distracted by news that the deal, the $340 million acquisition that would position Whitmore Capital as the dominant player in cloud security infrastructure across Asia, was suddenly at risk because a competitor had made a counteroffer. He'd taken the call, checked his watch, realized his charter was boarding, grabbed his briefcase and coat and walked straight to the gate, his mind already in Singapore, already calculating how to salvage the deal. And he'd left behind $10 million in bearer bonds. The bonds he needed to close the acquisition. The bonds that were uninsured because bearer instruments couldn't be insured. The bonds that were, legally speaking, as good as cash to whoever held them. Charles pulled out his phone. They were too far out for normal cell service, but the Gulfstream had satellite communication. He dialed his head of security, a former Secret Service agent named Robert Chen. Chen answered on the second ring. Mr. Whitmore, I left a black carry-on in the C-Terminal Executive Lounge. It contains highly sensitive financial instruments. I need it secured immediately. There was a pause. Chen didn't ask what kind of instruments or how sensitive. He'd worked for Charles long enough to know that when the billionaire used that tone, you moved fast and asked questions later. I'm calling airport security now, Chen said. What time did you leave the lounge? Charles checked his watch, calculated backwards. Approximately 1:40 a.m. Pacific. The bag is black, Toomey brand, leather luggage tag with my initials. It was beside chair 14 in the main seating area. I'll handle it personally. I'll call you back within the hour. The line went dead. Charles sat back down, his mind racing through scenarios. Best case, the bag was still sitting exactly where he'd left it, untouched, waiting for lost and found to log it in the morning. The lounge would have been empty after his departure. The cleaning crew wouldn't touch personal items. Security protocols were clear. But bearer bonds weren't like credit cards or phones. They couldn't be canceled, couldn't be frozen. Whoever physically possessed them owned them. That was the entire point. Anonymous, untraceable wealth transfer. The instrument that made his acquisition possible was also the instrument that made recovery complicated. He'd been carrying $10 million in negotiable securities through a public airport like an idiot. His private banker had warned him. His attorney had warned him. But Charles Whitmore had built a $2.3 billion fortune by taking calculated risks, and he'd been making this same trip with the same instruments for 3 years without incident. Until tonight. Jennifer was watching him carefully. Should I contact legal? Not yet. Let's see what Chen finds. But his instinct, the same instinct that had guided him through hostile takeovers and market crashes and board meetings, was screaming that something was wrong. The call came back 42 minutes later. The bag isn't there, Chen said, his voice tight. Airport security checked the lounge. Checked lost and found. Nothing matching the description has been logged. Charles felt something cold settle in his chest. What about security footage? That's the problem. The C-Terminal Executive Lounge cameras were down for system maintenance from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. There's no footage of the lounge interior during your departure window. How convenient, Charles said, his voice flat. Security is reviewing access logs. The lounge was cleaned between 2 o'clock and 2:30 a.m. by night shift janitorial staff. One cleaner, assigned to that terminal. They're pulling employee records now. I want a name. Naomi Brooks. 39 years old, employed by the airport for 3 years. Clean record, no disciplinary issues. She clocked out at 2:34 a.m. Charles closed his eyes. A cleaner. The most invisible person in the airport. The last person anyone would suspect. The perfect person to walk out with a fortune and disappear. Where is she now? Home, presumably. Her address is on file. But Mr. Whitmore, we need to be careful here. We can't accuse her without evidence. If she didn't take the bag, then where is it? Charles interrupted. The lounge was empty. The cameras were down. She was the only person with access. You're telling me that's a coincidence? Chin was quiet for a moment. I'm telling you we need to follow procedure. I've contacted the airport police. They're opening an investigation. They'll interview her this morning. I want to be there. Sir, that's not. I'm turning this plane around, Charles said. File a new flight plan. We're going back to Portland. Jennifer's eyes widened. David woke up in the back, startled by the tone. Mr. Whitmore, the Singapore deal is worthless without those bonds, Charles finished. Delay the meetings. Tell them I had a family emergency. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. But I'm not closing a $340 million acquisition without the capital to back it. He ended the call and stared out the window at the dark ocean below. Somewhere back in Portland, a cleaner was going home with his entire deal in her possession. Maybe she didn't even know what she had. Maybe she'd opened the bag, seen documents she didn't understand, and thrown it away. Or maybe, and this was what made his jaw clench, maybe she knew exactly what she had. Charles Whitmore had negotiated with sovereign wealth funds and cut deals with defense contractors. He'd stared down corporate raiders and outmaneuvered hostile boards. But he'd never felt as powerless as he did right now, 30,000 feet above the Pacific, flying away from a fortune he'd left in the hands of a stranger. He pulled up Naomi Brooks's employee photo on the tablet Chin had sent. A black woman with tired eyes and a professional smile that didn't reach them. The kind of face you'd pass 1,000 times in an airport and never notice. The kind of person who could disappear with $10 million and never be found. Unless she made a mistake. Turn the plane around, Charles told the pilot through the intercom. And then he did something he hadn't done in 15 years of running a billion-dollar empire. He waited. Powerless. Dependent on systems he didn't control and people he didn't trust. For the first time in his adult life, Charles Whitmore wasn't in control of his own fortune. And the woman who didn't even know his name. Naomi didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table from 3:47 a.m. until sunrise, staring at the black carry-on bag she'd placed on the chair across from her. The bag sat there like an accusation. Like a bomb. Like a choice she couldn't undo. Her apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Marcus's soft breathing from the bedroom he shared with her mother. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 740 square feet of government-subsidized housing on the east side of Portland. The windows didn't seal properly. The water heater worked when it felt like it. The carpet was 20 years old and stained with the evidence of a dozen previous tenants. But it was home. And in 14 days, if she couldn't come up with $1,800 in back rent, it wouldn't be home anymore. She looked at the bag again. Inside was more money than she'd see in 3 lifetimes. Money that could pay the rent. Pay her mother's medical bills. Pay for Marcus's asthma medication without having to choose between the inhaler and groceries. Money that could change everything. But it wasn't hers. And taking it would make her a thief. Naomi had grown up poor. Her father had left when she was 4. Her mother had worked 2 jobs, janitorial and cafeteria, to keep them fed. Naomi had worn hand-me-downs and eaten free school lunch and learned early that the world didn't care about poor black girls from broken homes. But her mother had taught her something else too. Something that stuck even when nothing else did. You can be poor, her mother had said. But you don't have to be cheap. Being poor is about money. Being cheap is about character. And character is the only thing they can't take from you. Naomi had carried those words through teenage pregnancy, through Marcus's father walking out, through her mother's arthritis diagnosis, through 3 years of scrubbing toilets at an airport that paid her barely enough to survive. She'd kept her character, and now it was being tested. The sun rose slowly, painting the kitchen in weak gray light. Naomi made coffee she couldn't afford and tried to think clearly. Returning the bag wasn't simple. She couldn't just walk into Lost and Found and hand over $10 million like it was a forgotten phone. She'd seen what happened to valuable items that went through official channels. 3 months ago, a passenger had reported a missing laptop. Security had reviewed footage, identified the cleaner who'd been in the area, and detained her for 6 hours. They'd searched her locker, her car, her home. The laptop had eventually been found in a different terminal entirely, left behind by the passenger themselves. The cleaner had quit. No apology. No compensation. Just gone. 2 weeks ago, Naomi had overheard 2 supervisors talking in the break room. One of them, Rick Paulson, a shift manager with a new truck he definitely couldn't afford on his salary, had been laughing about a lost Rolex that had never made it to processing. The airport's lost and found system was broken. Worse than broken. Corrupt. If Naomi handed the bag to the wrong person, it would never reach its owner. It would disappear into someone's personal collection or get sold off piece by piece. And she would be the one left holding blame when the owner came looking. She couldn't trust the system. But she also couldn't keep the bag, which left one option: verify ownership and return it directly. Naomi pulled the bag across the table and opened it again. The documents inside were intimidating. Legal language and financial terms she barely understood. But one thing was clear: the name embossed on the leather portfolio. Whitmore Capital Holdings. She pulled out her phone and searched. The results came immediately. Charles Whitmore, tech billionaire, founder and CEO of Whitmore Capital. Net worth estimated at $2.3 billion. Recent news about a major acquisition deal in Singapore. Singapore. That explained the rush, the distraction, the forgotten bag. She scrolled through articles, looking for contact information. His company had a website with a general inquiry form, but nothing direct. No phone number. No email. Just a corporate office address in downtown Portland and a message about contacting their communications department for all media requests. She wasn't media. She was a cleaner trying to return something that didn't belong to her. Naomi closed the laptop and rubbed her eyes. She'd been awake for 24 hours. Her shift started again at 10 p.m. She needed sleep. Needed to think. But first, she needed to hide the bag somewhere safer than her kitchen table. She carried it to her bedroom closet and placed it on the top shelf, behind a box of winter clothes Marcus had outgrown. Then she stacked shoe boxes in front of it. Not perfect, but better than leaving it visible. When she turned around, her mother was standing in the doorway. Evelyn Brooks was 67, thin from years of hard work and harder luck. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis, the joints swollen despite the medication they couldn't always afford. She was wearing the robe Naomi had bought her from Goodwill 2 Christmases ago. "You okay, baby?" her mother asked. "Fine, Mama. Just tired." Evelyn studied her with eyes that had seen through Naomi's lies since childhood. "You've been up all night. I heard you in the kitchen. Couldn't sleep. What's wrong?" "Everything," Naomi wanted to say. "I found $10 million at work, and I don't know what to do with it. I'm about to get evicted. Marcus needs new shoes. Your medication is running out. And I'm terrified that doing the right thing is going to destroy us." But instead she said, "Just work stress. They're changing the schedule again." Her mother didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "You work too hard. Someone has to." Evelyn crossed the room slowly, her movements stiff. She put a hand on Naomi's shoulder. "You're a good woman, Naomi. Your daddy was a fool to leave us. Marcus's daddy too. But you? You're stronger than both of them combined. Don't forget that." Naomi felt tears sting her eyes. "Thanks, Mama. Now get some sleep. Marcus will be up soon wanting breakfast." Her mother left, closing the door gently behind her. Naomi laid down on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. She had to find a way to contact Charles Whitmore directly. Had to verify that the bag was his, that the bonds were legitimate, that returning them wouldn't somehow implicate her in something she didn't understand. And she had to do it before the airport figured out what she'd done. Because sooner or later, probably sooner, someone was going to notice that a very expensive bag had gone missing. And when they reviewed the access logs and saw her name, they'd come asking questions. Questions she couldn't answer without admitting she'd taken it. Naomi closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But all she could see was the bag in her closet. The choice in her hands. The test she'd given herself without meaning to. Outside her window, the city woke up. People went to work, bought coffee, complained about traffic, lived their normal lives. While Naomi Brooks lay in bed, harboring $10 million and wondering if honesty was about to cost her everything, Naomi woke to her phone buzzing at 2:17 p.m. Unknown number. She stared at the screen, her heart already hammering. Nobody called her from unknown numbers except bill collectors and spam. She let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. Same number. This time she answered. Ms. Brooks. A man's voice. Professional. Clipped. This is Detective Raymond Shaw with Portland Airport Police. I need to ask you some questions about your shift last night. Are you available to come in this afternoon? Naomi sat up, her mouth dry. Questions about what? A missing item was reported from the C-Terminal Executive Lounge. We're interviewing all staff who had access to the area. It's routine. Should only take a few minutes. Routine. The word people used when they were lying. I'm scheduled to work tonight, Naomi said carefully. Can I come in before my shift? Around 9. Actually, I'd prefer earlier. Say 4 p.m. I can meet you at the security office near the main terminal. Not a request. A summons. Okay. 4 p.m. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. See you then. The line went dead. Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, phone trembling in her hand. They knew. They didn't have proof. Couldn't have proof. The cameras were down, but they knew. Or at least suspected. She looked at the closet where the bag was hidden. Every instinct screamed at her to get rid of it. Drive to the river. Throw it in. Walk away. Deny everything. But that would make her guilty. And the bonds were traceable. If they turned up later, if someone found them and connected them back to the airport, back to that night, back to her, she'd go to prison. No. Running made you guilty. Lying made you guilty. The only way through this was truth. But truth was complicated when you'd walked out of an airport with $10 million in your trunk. Naomi showered quickly, her mind racing through responses. How did she explain taking the bag without sounding like a thief? How did she prove her intentions were honest when her actions looked guilty? She needed help. Needed advice. But who? Her mother would panic. Marcus was 7. Her friends, the few she had, worked the same low-wage jobs she did. None of them knew lawyers or understood financial crimes or could tell her how to navigate an interrogation by airport police. She was alone. At 3:45 p.m., Naomi parked in the employee lot and walked through security with her ID badge. The officer at the checkpoint, usually friendly, barely looked at her. She didn't know if that was normal or ominous. The security office was on the second floor of the main terminal, tucked behind TSA screening and accessible only with clearance. Naomi had never been inside. Cleaners didn't have clearance for anything except supply closets and break rooms. Detective Shaw met her in the lobby. He was white, early 50s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd worked too many overnight shifts. Not unkind, but not warm either. Ms. Brooks, thanks for coming in. Follow me. He led her down a corridor lined with security monitors, through a door marked Authorized Personnel Only, and into a small interview room. Gray walls. Metal table. 2 chairs. A camera mounted in the corner with a blinking red light. Have a seat, Shaw said, gesturing to the chair facing the camera. Naomi sat. Her hands were sweating. She clasped them in her lap. Shaw sat across from her and pulled out a notepad. Like I said on the phone, this is routine. We're talking to everyone who was working in C-Terminal last night. You're not under arrest. You're not a suspect. We're just gathering information. Lies. All of it. Okay, Naomi said. You were assigned to clean the C-Terminal Executive Lounge last night, correct? Yes. What time did you start? Around 2:04 a.m. I radioed my supervisor when I finished at 2:34. 30 minutes. Is that typical? For that lounge, yes. It's not usually very busy after midnight. Shaw made a note. Did you see anything unusual? Any items left behind? This was it. The moment where lying would damn her and truth might save her. There was a coat, Naomi said carefully. Expensive looking. Draped over one of the chairs. And a glass that still had liquid in it. Someone left in a hurry. Anything else? Naomi met his eyes. What are you looking for, detective? Shaw leaned back, studying her. A passenger reported a missing carry-on bag. Black, designer brand. Contains valuable property. Last seen in the C-Terminal Executive Lounge. How valuable? That's confidential. Naomi nodded slowly. I found the bag. Shaw's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Sharper. More focused. Where is it now? At my home. Silence. Shaw wrote something in his notepad. Why didn't you turn it into Lost and Found? Because I don't trust Lost and Found, Naomi said bluntly. I've worked here 3 years. I've seen what happens to expensive items that go through official channels. They disappear, and the cleaners get blamed. So you took it home instead. I secured it, Naomi corrected, until I could verify ownership and return it properly. Shaw's pen stopped moving. You secured it. Yes. Ms. Brooks, do you understand how that sounds? I understand how it looks. But I also understand that if I'd turned that bag in last night, the owner would never have seen it again. And I'd be sitting in this room anyway, getting accused of stealing it. Nobody's accusing you of anything. Then why am I here? Shaw sighed. What's in the bag, Ms. Brooks? Documents. Financial documents. I don't know exactly what they are, but I know they're important. Did you try to access them? Use them? No. Did you tell anyone about them? No. Shaw leaned forward. Here's the problem. You removed property from the airport without authorization. Property that doesn't belong to you. That's theft, regardless of your intentions. Then arrest me, Naomi said quietly. Or let me explain myself to the owner. Shaw blinked. What? I want to speak to the person who owns the bag. Directly. I'll explain what I did and why. I'll return everything exactly as I found it. But I'm not handing it to you or anyone else until I know it's going to the right person. Shaw stared at her like she'd grown a second head. That's not how this works. Then we have a problem, Naomi said. Because I'm not moving until I talk to the owner. The room went very quiet. The camera in the corner blinked its red eye. Shaw's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't say. Finally, he stood. Wait here. He left the room, closing the door behind him. Naomi sat alone under the camera's gaze and tried to breathe. She'd just confessed to taking $10 million. She'd just refused to return it to police. She'd just painted herself as either the stupidest criminal in history or the most principled poor woman in Portland. She wasn't sure which was worse. The door opened again 10 minutes later. Shaw walked in, followed by a man Naomi recognized from her phone research that morning. Charles Whitmore, billionaire, owner of the forgotten bag. And judging by the expression on his face, he was here for blood. Charles Whitmore looked like he hadn't slept in 36 hours. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his eyes red-rimmed and hard. He stood in the doorway of the interrogation room, staring at Naomi with an expression that mixed fury, exhaustion, and something that might have been desperation. Detective Shaw gestured to the empty chair. Mr. Whitmore, this is Naomi Brooks. She's admitted to removing your property from the airport. Where is it? Charles asked, his voice clipped and cold. Naomi met his gaze steadily. At my home. Secured and untouched. Untouched, Charles repeated, his jaw clenching. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to listen, Naomi said. Shaw cleared his throat. Ms. Brooks, Mr. Whitmore has flown back from a critical business meeting to recover his property. I strongly suggest you cooperate fully. If you return everything now and sign a statement, we can make this go away quietly. No charges. No record. You go back to your life. Naomi looked at Shaw, then at Charles, then back at Shaw. Make it go away. That's right, Shaw said, his tone almost gentle. You made a mistake. We understand. You were probably curious, maybe even tempted. But you didn't actually take anything, did you? You were planning to return it all along. He was giving her an exit. A narrative that painted her as confused, not criminal. All she had to do was agree, sign the statement, and hand over the bag. And in the process, admit that taking it had been wrong. Which would mean every instinct she'd followed, every reason she'd hidden the bag instead of reporting it, had been a mistake. No, Naomi said quietly. Shaw blinked. Excuse me. I didn't make a mistake. I made a choice. And I'm not signing anything until I speak to Mr. Whitmore alone. Charles's expression darkened. You're not in a position to make demands. Neither are you, Naomi said, looking directly at him. Your bag has been in my possession for 14 hours. If I'd wanted to steal it, I would have. If I'd wanted to use what's inside, I would have. But it's sitting in my closet, exactly as I found it, because that's not who I am. Then why didn't you turn it in? Charles demanded. Because the system is broken, Naomi said flatly. And I've seen what happens to cleaners who find expensive items. We get blamed when they disappear. We get questioned when they're recovered. We're always guilty until proven otherwise. Shaw opened his mouth to object, but Naomi kept talking. 3 months ago, A cleaner named Patricia Torres found a Rolex in the first-class bathroom. She turned it in properly, filled out all the forms, did everything right. The watch vanished from lost and found within 6 hours. When the passenger came looking for it, Patricia was interrogated for 4 hours. They searched her locker, her car, her home. They never found the watch. Patricia quit. No apology. No compensation. Shaw's expression tightened. He knew the case. Everyone did. 2 weeks ago, Naomi continued, I overheard supervisors laughing about a lost item that never made it to processing. This airport has a theft problem, detective. But it's not the cleaners doing the stealing. That's a serious accusation, Shaw said, his voice hardening. It's the truth, Naomi said. And if I'd handed that bag to Lost and Found last night, Mr. Whitmore would never have seen it again. So yes, I took it. I secured it. And I'm not apologizing for protecting someone else's property from the people who were supposed to protect it themselves. The room went silent. Charles was staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Shaw looked torn between anger and something that might have been grudging respect. You're admitting to theft, Shaw said finally. I'm admitting to trusting myself more than I trust you, Naomi replied. Charles pulled out the chair and sat down heavily. He studied Naomi for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. When he spoke, his voice was quieter but no less intense. Do you have any idea what's in that bag? Yes, Naomi said. Bearer bonds worth $10 million. Documents for an acquisition deal. Financial instruments I don't fully understand but know are important. Charles's eyebrows rose slightly. You looked. I had to verify ownership. I wasn't going to return a bag full of money to the wrong person. And yet you're refusing to return it now. I'm refusing to hand it to someone who might make it disappear, Naomi corrected. You're the owner. You're here. I'm willing to return it directly to you, but not through official channels. Shaw stood abruptly. Ms. Brooks, I've tried to help you here, but you're making this very difficult. If you don't cooperate. Then what? Naomi interrupted, looking up at him. You'll arrest me? Charge me with theft? Do it. But I'm not handing over that bag until I speak to Mr. Whitmore privately. That's not happening, Shaw said firmly. Then we're done here, Naomi said, crossing her arms. Charles held up a hand. Detective, give us the room. Shaw looked shocked. Sir, I can't. You can and you will, Charles said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I want to speak with Ms. Brooks alone. 5 minutes. Shaw hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the reality that Charles Whitmore was not a man you said no to. Finally, he nodded. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside. He left, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. The silence in the room was thick and electric. Naomi and Charles sat across from each other, two people from completely different worlds, connected by a black carry-on bag and a choice that defied logic. Why? Charles asked finally. Why didn't you just take the money and run? Because it wasn't mine, Naomi said simply. You're struggling financially. I can see it in your employee file. Behind on rent. Medical bills. Single mother. You could have changed your entire life. By becoming a thief? By taking an opportunity. Naomi shook her head. That's not opportunity. That's theft dressed up in better language. Charles leaned back, studying her. You don't trust the system. You don't trust the police. But you expect me to believe you're protecting my property out of the goodness of your heart. I don't care what you believe, Naomi said. I know what I did and why I did it. And in about 2 hours, I'm going to go home, get that bag, and bring it here. You can inspect every document, every bond, every USB drive, and you'll see that nothing has been touched, nothing has been copied, nothing has been compromised. And then what? And then you take your property and leave. And I go back to cleaning toilets. And we both forget this ever happened. Charles was quiet for a long moment. You really believe that's how this ends? I believe that's how it should end, Naomi said. What actually happens is up to you. The door opened. Shaw poked his head in. Time's up. Charles stood. He looked down at Naomi, and something in his expression had shifted. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Curiosity. Maybe even respect. Go home, he said. Get the bag. Bring it back here within 2 hours. If everything is as you say, we'll resolve this quietly. And if it's not? Naomi asked. Charles's jaw tightened. Then we'll resolve it loudly. Naomi stood, nodded once, and walked past him out of the interrogation room. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was hammering. But her head was clear. She'd done exactly what she said she'd do. She'd told the truth. She'd refused the easy way out. She'd demanded to be treated with dignity instead of suspicion. Now she just had to prove she wasn't insane. Naomi drove home in a daze, retrieved the bag from her closet, and drove back to the airport with $10 million in her passenger seat and a prayer on her lips that honesty wouldn't destroy her after all. When she walked back into the security office at 6:47 p.m., Charles Whitmore was waiting. Naomi placed the black carry-on on the table between them, untouched, exactly as promised. Charles opened the bag slowly, his hands moving with the careful precision of someone expecting a trap. He pulled out the leather portfolio first, checked the seal, opened it. His eyes scanned the bearer bonds quickly, professionally, looking for signs of tampering. Nothing. He checked the USB drives. Still in their case. He examined the documents, rifling through pages, checking serial numbers against something on his phone. Everything was there. Everything was intact. He looked up at Naomi, and the expression on his face was pure confusion. You didn't touch any of this. I told you I didn't. But you could have. You had 14 hours. You could have photographed everything, copied the drives, accessed the accounts. I could have, Naomi agreed. But I didn't. Because that would be theft. Shaw was watching from the corner of the room, his expression unreadable. Two other security officers stood by the door, silent witnesses to whatever was unfolding. Charles sat down heavily, the bag open in front of him. I don't understand you. You don't have to, Naomi said. You just have to take your property and let me go home. It's not that simple. It should be. Charles looked at Shaw. Detective, I need you to investigate something. Ms. Brooks mentioned that valuable items have been disappearing from Lost and Found. I want to know if that's true. Shaw shifted uncomfortably. Sir, that's an internal matter. Make it an external matter, Charles interrupted. Because if Ms. Brooks is right, if there's systematic theft happening at this airport, then she didn't just protect my property. She exposed a criminal operation. Naomi blinked. That wasn't where she thought this was going. Shaw's expression darkened. Mr. Whitmore, I understand you're grateful, but I'm not grateful, Charles said sharply. I'm angry. Because if this woman is telling the truth, it means my property was safer in her closet than it would have been in your secure facility. That's a problem. He turned back to Naomi. Tell me exactly what you heard. Names. Details. Naomi hesitated. Naming names meant making enemies. Meant putting a target on her back. But she'd come this far on truth. Stopping now would make it all meaningless. Rick Paulson, she said quietly. Shift supervisor for C and D terminals. 2 weeks ago, I heard him in the break room with another supervisor, laughing about a Rolex that never made it to processing. He drives a new truck. Makes $42,000 a year. You do the math. Shaw's jaw tightened. That's hearsay. Then investigate it, Naomi said. Pull his financial records. Check his purchases against his salary. Look at the lost and found logs for the past year and cross-reference them with passenger claims. You'll find a pattern. Charles was watching her intently. You've thought about this. I've lived it, Naomi corrected. I've worked here for 3 years. I've seen cleaners blamed for things they didn't do while supervisors drive cars they can't afford. I've kept my head down because speaking up gets you fired. But you asked for the truth, Mr. Whitmore. That's the truth. Shaw pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway, speaking in low, urgent tones. Charles leaned forward. If you're wrong about this. I'm not, Naomi said. If you are, you just committed slander against a supervisor. That's grounds for termination. Possibly legal action. I know. So why say it? Naomi met his eyes. Because you asked. And because I'm tired of watching corrupt people get away with things while honest people get punished. Someone had to say it. Might as well be me. Charles stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. The look of someone encountering something rare. You protected my property, he said slowly. You risked your job, possibly your freedom, to keep it safe. You refused shortcuts. You demanded to speak to me directly. And now you're exposing corruption that could get you blacklisted from airport employment permanently. Naomi nodded. That about covers it. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. The right thing, Charles repeated, as if testing the words. Most people don't even know what that means anymore. Most people haven't had to choose between right and survival, Naomi said quietly. When you're poor, every choice is a test. And the world is watching to see if you'll fail. Charles was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. My son is in the hospital. Head trauma from a motorcycle accident. When I got the call, I was sitting in that lounge, waiting for my charter. I took the call, and my mind went blank. I grabbed my coat and briefcase and ran. I forgot the bag completely. Naomi's expression softened. I'm sorry. Is he okay? He's stable now. But for 48 hours, I didn't know if he'd wake up. All the money in the world couldn't fix that. Couldn't buy me certainty. Couldn't give me control. He gestured to the bag. This $10 million? It's critical for my business. But it's nothing compared to my son's life. And I almost lost both because I was distracted. You didn't lose either, Naomi said gently. Because of you, Charles said. You could have kept this. You had every reason to. Every excuse. But you didn't. And I need to understand why. Naomi took a breath. I didn't protect your money because you're rich, Mr. Whitmore. I protected it because it wasn't mine. My son Marcus has asthma. When he was 3, he had an attack so bad he turned blue. I was holding him in the emergency room, begging God to let him breathe. The doctor asked if we had insurance. I said no. He treated Marcus anyway. Saved his life. Didn't ask for payment until my son was safe. She looked down at her hands. That doctor didn't help us because we deserved it or because we could pay. He helped us because it was right. And I've never forgotten that. When I saw your bag, I thought about him. About doing the right thing even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. The room was completely silent. Even Shaw, who had stepped back inside, was listening. I have a son too, Charles said quietly. And if he were here, I'd want him to meet you. To learn from you. Because you're teaching me something I'd forgotten. What's that? That character isn't about what you do when people are watching. It's about what you do when they're not. Shaw cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, I've made some calls. We're opening an investigation into lost and found procedures. If Ms. Brooks's allegations have merit, we'll pursue it fully. Charles nodded, not taking his eyes off Naomi. Good. And detective? Ms. Brooks is not to be charged with anything. She acted to protect my property when your systems failed. If anything, she should be commended. Shaw looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. Understood. Charles stood, extending his hand across the table. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. You saved my deal. You saved my reputation. And you reminded me that integrity still exists in this world. Naomi shook his hand, her grip firm despite her exhaustion. I just did what anyone should do. No, Charles said. You did what almost no one would do. And that deserves more than a handshake. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I want to offer you a position. Director of Asset Security and Compliance for Whitmore Capital. You'll oversee secure transport of sensitive materials, develop integrity protocols, and train staff on proper handling procedures. Salary starts at $120,000, full benefits, education sponsorship for continuing development. Naomi's breath caught. Mr. Whitmore, I'm a cleaner. I don't have a degree. I don't have. You have integrity, Charles interrupted. You have judgment. You have the moral clarity that most people spend their whole lives looking for. I can teach you the technical skills. I can't teach character. And I need someone with your character overseeing my most valuable assets. Naomi stared at him, tears forming in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Charles said simply. Let me turn your sacrifice into an opportunity. Not as charity, as trust. Naomi wiped her eyes. Then she smiled. Yes. The story broke 48 hours later. Not because Charles wanted publicity. He preferred to operate in the shadows of corporate power. But because Shaw's investigation into Lost and Found uncovered exactly what Naomi had described. A systematic theft operation involving 3 supervisors and 2 security personnel who had been skimming high-value items for 18 months. Rick Paulson was arrested at his home, along with $87,000 in stolen property. The new truck Naomi had mentioned, purchased with cash from selling a passenger's diamond bracelet. When the media got hold of the story, they couldn't resist the narrative. Billionaire loses $10 million at airport. Poor cleaner returns it. Exposes corruption in the process. The headlines wrote themselves. Airport cleaner's honesty exposes theft ring. Woman chooses integrity over $10 million. From invisibility to inspiration, Naomi Brooks's story. Charles held a press conference at Whitmore Capital headquarters, with Naomi standing beside him. She'd never been comfortable with attention, but she understood that the story mattered. Not because of her, but because of what it represented. Ms. Brooks had every reason to keep what she found, Charles told the assembled reporters. She was struggling financially. She had family obligations. The security cameras were down. No one would have known. But she chose honesty anyway. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. He turned to Naomi. In a world that often rewards the opposite, her choice reminds us that character still matters. That integrity isn't dead. That doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, changes everything. The reporters shouted questions. Naomi answered them simply, honestly, without pretense. Would you do it again? One asked. Yes, Naomi said without hesitation. Because my son is watching. My mother is watching. And I want them to see that being poor doesn't mean being cheap. That you can have nothing and still choose honor. What about the job offer from Mr. Whitmore? Some people are calling it a reward. It's not a reward, Naomi said firmly. It's an opportunity. Mr. Whitmore is trusting me with responsibility because I proved I could handle it when it mattered. That's not charity. That's merit. What would you say to others facing similar choices? Naomi paused, thinking of all the people watching at home. The cleaners and security guards and service workers who lived invisible lives. The people who struggled every day and wondered if honesty was worth the cost. I'd say that money tests character, but poverty reveals it. When you have nothing, your choices define you completely. And the world is waiting to see what you'll do when no one is watching. Choose who you want to be, not who you have to be. The press conference ended. The cameras packed up. The reporters filed out. Charles walked Naomi to her car, not the old Honda anymore, but a modest used sedan he'd helped her purchase. Not a gift, an advance on her first paycheck. You start Monday, he said. My assistant will send over the onboarding information. I'm terrified, Naomi admitted. I've never worked in an office. Never managed anything except cleaning schedules. You'll be fine, Charles said. You have something most executives spend their whole careers trying to develop, moral clarity. Trust your instincts. They've served you well so far. Naomi smiled. How's your son? Recovering. He woke up 3 days ago. First thing he asked about was his motorcycle. Charles laughed, the sound tinged with relief. I told him the motorcycle was gone. He told me I was being dramatic. We're still negotiating. Sounds like he's definitely your son. Yeah, Charles said softly. He is. And I almost lost him because I was too focused on work to pay attention to what mattered. You reminded me of that too. He extended his hand again. Thank you, Naomi. For everything. She shook it. Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me. You made that impossible to avoid, Charles said with a slight smile. 3 months later, Naomi stood in the C-Terminal Executive Lounge at 2:17 a.m. But this time, she wasn't cleaning. She was inspecting security protocols, reviewing access logs, training new hires on proper handling of valuable items. She wore a blazer instead of a uniform, carried a tablet instead of a mop, commanded respect instead of invisibility. Her mother's medication was paid for. Marcus had new shoes and asthma treatments that actually worked. The eviction notice was a memory. The cramped apartment was now a 2-bedroom rental in a safer neighborhood with a landlord who fixed things when they broke. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was internal. Naomi had spent her entire life being invisible, watching, serving, cleaning up after people who never saw her. She'd accepted it as the price of survival, the cost of being poor in a world built for the wealthy. But that night, when she'd found a bag worth more than her life and chosen integrity over survival, everything changed. Not because of the job or the money or the recognition, but because she'd proven to herself that she was exactly who she'd always believed she was when no one was watching. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the tarmac. Planes lifted into the night sky, their lights blinking against the darkness, carrying people to lives she used to only imagine. Her phone buzzed. A text from Charles. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your input on the new security protocols. Don't be late. She smiled and typed back. I'll be there. Another text appeared. This one from Marcus's teacher. Marcus told the class about your new job today. He said his mom is a superhero. Thought you should know. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her reflection in the window. A woman who'd survived poverty and single motherhood and invisibility. A woman who'd chosen honor when dishonor would have been easier. A woman who'd changed her entire life by refusing to compromise the one thing no one could take from her. Her character. Money tests character, Naomi thought, remembering the bag sitting open on her kitchen table. The choice that defied logic. The moment that changed everything. Poverty reveals it. And integrity, when no one is watching, changes everything. She turned away from the window and walked out of the lounge. Not as a cleaner this time. As a woman who'd earned her place at the table by refusing to steal from it. The airport hummed around her. Planes departed. People rushed. Lives intersected and diverged in the great machine of modern travel. And somewhere in the machinery, invisible people still worked through the night. Still cleaned. Still served. Still made choices when no one was watching. Naomi made a mental note to review their employment conditions tomorrow. To audit their treatment. To ensure that the next person facing an impossible choice would at least be working in a system designed to support honesty instead of punish it. Because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible. And she would never forget what it took to be seen.